my mercury amalgams to outgas even more. The FDA is quick to warn the public of the dangers of driving while on certain medications. I would like to know why, Jeff, you allow me to drive. I don't remember ever getting warned at a dentist's office about the dangers of driving with mercury in my mouth. Each time I step into my car, I run the risk of killing myself, my 4-year-old daughter, or somebody else. For the second time in 2 years, I am having acute issues with my eyesight, vertigo, and brain fog. My daughter, the love of my life, is placed in a dangerous situation each time I buckle her up. The question that remains is, can I sue you for my loss and suffering? This has affected the growth of my business for years. What about the permanent damage to my body? What about the expenses to remove my amalgams, put in new fillings, the cost of vitamin C IVs, and better yet, who is going to pay for the chelation I have to undergo? While you're at home sleeping comfortably, I will be waking up every 3 hours for 1 to 2 years to give myself oral chelation. Extra expenses will be needed to radically change my diet. I will be at war with my body, endangering my life to rid of the mercury. Where is your responsibility in this? The internet is freeing countries. Websites like WikiLeaks are exposing corruption, and a new political party is emerging to free the people and rid of the bureaucracies like the FDA. I love America, but to think that our health is not a priority in your eyes makes me embarrassed to be an American. This poisoning against our own people is a form of genocide, and for sure is a crime against humanity that will one day be brought to a court of law. I commend Kentucky for currently trying to kick the FDA out of their state. Just like Thomas Jefferson said no to the federal government, we here today stand in unity to say no to our federal government. What is the point of federal regulation when you're biased and paid off? You have assumed an undelegated power to poison the people, the same people that pay your salaries. Now regarding your gifts, Jeff. I'm hoping that you might have a connection to get me approval to sell these devices to the public, these products to the public. I brought today a mercury mug, a mercury straw, and a mercury pacifier. After reading your website, I feel totally confident that I can word it in a way to convince people that they're totally safe. First, we're going to tell the public that they're silver instead of mercury. People are stupid anyway, they'll never question it. We'll have manufactured these with the ingredients taken from your website. It's a mixture of metals consisting of liquid mercury and a powdered alloy composed of silver, tin, and copper. They will only outgas minimally at standards that are acceptable to the FDA. We will ignore the worldwide evidence of the dangers in using them, and will lobby the government heavily to ensure we're protected as a manufacturer. Enjoy, Jeff. Just pay no attention to the skull and crossbones on the mug. Be careful when cleaning them, and especially when drinking hot liquids in them. Oh, and do get back to me on the results of the heavy metals hair test for your loved one's baby after sucking on the pacifier. And don't tell me that the baby was eating sushi, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Scarano. Our next speaker is Patrick Murphy with the International Laser Display Association. James Hardy with Consumers for Dental Choice.
I want to thank the FDA for hosting this town meeting and listening to all different points of view on different issues. I'm here as a mercury-free dentist, and I learned about the mercury issue as a freshman in dental school in 1978 when I heard that fillings were 45 to 70% mercury. I raised my hand. I said, what about the Minamata Bay disaster in Japan, where there are a huge number of birth defects, stillborns, and other things happening in Minamata Bay, and it turned out that it was mercury causing the problem. And what about the FDA taking tuna fish off the shelves when it's 1 part per million or more, and we're putting in fillings that are chewed on for 20 or 30 years at 700,000 parts per million? How is that safe? And my professor said, well, it's all tied up. And I said, well, if it's all tied up, why did they break down? But they break down because the mercury comes out. And it's been shown time and time again that mercury comes out of the fillings 24 hours a day. Sometimes at a greater rate, sometimes at a lesser rate. Every 10 degrees rise in temperature doubles the amount of mercury vapor that comes off the fillings. Now, there's no need to use mercury fillings anymore. They're brought over here from Europe in 1833 before the Civil War. They're very old technology. They're not as good as the new composites. I've been a dentist for nearly 30 years. I have never placed a mercury filling, and I have not found a need to have a mercury filling in any restoration that I couldn't use something else that is safer, that doesn't contain a heavy metal. So there's really no need to use mercury. Now, there's a cradle-to-grave problem with mercury fillings, and that is when you first buy the mercury filling, you buy it in capsules. Those capsules can break, or after you shake them up and open them, that stuff can fall on the floor and it will contaminate the office. So there's a real estate problem here. Dental practices that have been in offices for a while have, most of them anyway, probably, and if not all of them, have had a mercury spill somewhere. So there's mercury inside the office. If someone came in during the sale of that piece of real estate and had a mercury vapor analyzer, like a Jerome mercury vapor analyzer, and analyzed the air in that office, they would say, well, this real estate really shouldn't be sold. It should be plowed under because of the contamination in the air. There is another problem that the piece of mercury that is not put into the patient's tooth has to be treated as a hazardous waste. From cradle to grave, in other words, from the dental office to the recycler, you have to have paperwork that shows that it was disposed of properly. After an amalgam is taken out of a patient's tooth, it also is a hazardous substance, but somehow inside the tooth it is not. I don't quite understand that, and any reasonable person should not be able to understand that. Now, mercury fillings have caused other problems too, and I want to read you a quick story. It was late August in 1989. The place was Michigan. 4 people, 2 men and 2 women who lived in the same home lay dead. Less than a month earlier, they were hospitalized after complaining of chest pain, diarrhea, nausea, and shortness of breath. Their breathing became more labored and difficult. 4 days into their hospital stay, it was learned that one of the men had been collecting mercury fillings. He had been heating them up in the basement so he could extract the small amount of silver from the fillings to sell. Substantial respiratory support, along with aggressive medical procedures to remove mercury from their bodies, was initiated to no avail. All 4 died of mercury poisoning. Their house was extensively cleaned in the hopes of removing mercury, but the cleaning failed and the contaminated house was declared unfit for habitation. It had to be torn down. We can only hope that the mercury-laden rubble was disposed of as hazardous waste. This is the same filling that may be in your mouth right now. When a substance can create problems from cradle to grave, and there are plenty of good substitutes to replace it, it makes absolutely no sense to continue using it. So I'm here to support a ban on mercury used in dentistry. It's really the only branch of medicine that uses something as dangerous as an implant inside the human body. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Rebecca Locke.
Hi, I want to thank you guys so much for listening to our concerns. I'm here for my mom to speak about mercury toxicity and amalgam fillings, and my name is Rebecca. I'm going to briefly tell her story and then just give some facts about mercury poisoning. As a child, my mom was exposed to mercury in the form of the antiseptic Mercuricone after seriously cutting her knee. She was given a large dose and afterwards hospitalized, and she was told by doctors that her parents were told she wasn't able to walk again. She did, however, recover from that, and she was able to walk. However, she did have fatigue and muscle pain and poor balance for the rest of her adolescence and childhood. After getting a silver filling when she was a teenager, she experienced more problems, and then as an adult, she got another silver filling, and then I came along. and she was diagnosed with MS shortly afterwards. As a child, I remember her not being able to walk, having to lay down a lot, not being able to see out of one eye, very tragic things for a mother with young children. Excuse me, I'm nervous. A few years later, she watched a special on 60 Minutes on the possibility of the link between toxic exposure to mercury through dental fillings and neurological dysfunction. After having her fillings removed, she was free from new symptoms of MS, and she actually seemed to be getting better. And this has been consistent with thousands of other stories where similar situations have happened. She unknowingly was exposed to mercury again a few years later when she got a flu shot, and they confirmed there was thimerosal in the flu shot. She had an MS attack, and we wondered why. Sure enough, we looked back at the flu shot she had thimerosal, and usually her attacks would happen very shortly after the exposure, almost the same day sometimes. She then again was exposed through some eardrops that were put in her ears, and they again contained thimerosal. She didn't think to check them, and she now is pretty much wheelchair bound, and she pretty much can't function normally. That's why she's not here today, and she asked me to come and speak for her. She can't be the grandmother she wants to be to my kids, and she of course hasn't been able to pursue many of her own dreams as well. That's my mom's story, and I would like to thank you so much for listening to us. I also would like to remind you about some facts about mercury poisoning, and they are documented by many studies. Mercury, of course, as we all know, is highly toxic and confirmed as a neurotoxin. The leader of the World Health Organization has stated that there's no safe level of mercury. A silver amalgam filling contains about 50% mercury. Amalgam fillings have never been proven safe, and they've never been, I don't even believe they've been tested for safety. Mercury in amalgam does leak into the body, and that's a scientific fact that has been shown in studies. Autopsies show that people who do have fillings have higher concentrations of mercury in their organs and tissues than people who do not. And many times I believe these are higher than safe standards. Mercury toxicity does produce symptoms of nervous disorders, including tremors, blindness, speech and vision problems, balance disorders, mental dysfunction, and retardation. Mercury is used, as we all probably know, in multi-dose vial vaccines, as a preservative for many medicines, cosmetics, cleaning chemicals, and it's now even in things like light bulbs. Common sense alone tells me this isn't a good combination. Why are dentists and hygienists given such strict guidelines, as Dr. Hardy probably mentioned, when we have it in our mouths? After an amalgam filling, most of the time perhaps there's not traceable problems. However, what about the times when a body burden threshold is reached, like the case of my mom, and someone does become ill? Most doctors, I believe, wouldn't even diagnose this properly, because like my mom, her symptoms mimic many chronic diseases that are becoming much more prevalent over the last 100 years, and I find that interesting. With millions of people who have these fillings, isn't it skeptical to think that no one is affected when there's virtually no limits, no warnings, and no precautions on amalgam fillings? There have been thousands of people who have suffered ill effects after dental amalgams who have voiced their concerns, and thousands have been documented in medical literature. Also, there's many health professionals who have warned against the use of mercury in fillings, but they are ignored, silenced, and the evidence is dismissed. I read that even dentists that even say that they want to be mercury-free or remove fillings actually get punished or they hear it from the ADA for doing this. And for the most part, America trusts her government and regulatory agencies. Because of this, Americans are blindly allowing this known neurotoxin to be embedded in their own mouths, in the mouths of their children. I would like to respectfully appeal to you distinguished members of the FDA. Please accept responsibility to warn and educate the American public from the dangers of mercury poisoning. Please make policies that will empower dentists to have the responsibility and the opportunity to talk to their patients without being punished by the ADA. Please do not let special interest, corruption, and politics come before human suffering. Please remember the money this is costing families, individuals, and our weakened healthcare system. Please remember the thousands that are living an impaired life with a debilitating condition. And please remember my mom. As we look back in history, we can see obvious mistakes made by generations before us, by institutions that shaped popular culture and policy. And I believe again in the future this will happen, to our shame if we refuse to act on the issue of amalgam fillings. I want to thank you so very much again, and God bless you.
Next speaker, H.L. Sam Queen, the Institute for Health Realities.
Thank you for this opportunity. I believe you will have copies of my speech here today, but I'm the director of Institute for Health Realities out in Colorado Springs, and we developed the first objectively measured health model. I also was the author of the first medical reference book on chronic mercury toxicity. That came about from my own poisoning, which was not from dental amalgam. It was working in the clinical laboratory back in the 50s and 60s. OSHA came by and removed that instrument. It doesn't happen anymore. But as we listen here today and said, understand that we're moving at 65,000 miles an hour going around our big sun. We're really moving. You always wonder, the big question is, why doesn't our atmosphere just blow off at that speed? You know, I mean, I'm not sure why we're talking about amalgam, except that amalgam is just part of a bigger story. Mercury is so incredibly toxic material. It's very persistent. We can throw away a lot of chemicals into our depositories, and they tend to degrade. Mercury has a hard time being able to do that, and one reason is the fact that it vaporizes. It takes on a number of different reactions. I'm also a member of the American Chemical Society, and this is the...
Excuse me, Mr. Queen, can you use the microphone, please?
I'm also a member of the American Chemical Society, and this is the International Year of Chemistry. And it's very interesting. We're trying very hard in the American Chemical Society to get rid of all further use of mercury. Everybody is. The Mercury Project is really a phenomenal idea. We used to have a lot of mercury we used for the production of plastics. We don't do that anymore. We found a new way. But China, you know, they're still using it the old way. And one of the big problems we've got 500,000, we have 5,000 metric tons of mercury stored underground as a result of our nuclear weapons plan, when we used to use mercury for the enrichment of lithium. Now, we had an HR 1584 tried to get passed to get something done to make sure nobody sold that. Well, we're not sure what's going to happen to that. We think that could be up for grabs to be sold. Would you like to have that happen? Well, the big problem that's happening in the world today starts with mercury itself. It's the most toxic material, and it is an absolutely time bomb that we've got to do something about our own exposure. We got to tighten up things, and we have to tighten up the whole world. Where we live right now is a very small planet, very small place. There has been an ongoing study of polar bears since 1920, and a report just out this year shows that over the last 90 years, we have had an annual increase of 1.6% rise in the level of hair mercury in those polar bears. Now, these are the canaries. There's two sets of big canaries that we look at. One is a polar bear, and the other is the amphibians. Well, what's interesting about amphibians is the very fact that they have their eggs, and through maternal transfer of mercury, that's well established. Well, what hadn't been established until this year, just reported in March of this year, the last of March, what's very clear is that when you subject the tadpoles of that came from maternal exposures, when you expose them to very small levels of mercury from their diet, what happens is that they lose their ability to be able to think, apparently, if you can imagine that. But they don't find their food well. They don't swim as rapidly as they did, and also they wind up having a mortality rate that's somewhat higher than, actually 50% higher that you might expect in a creature so small. The idea is that it's not only just maternal exposure. We know from bodyburden.org, that was an interesting website at one time where they studied how many people, how many toxins our people are being exposed to every day. And from those studies, it's very clear there's nobody in this room who's not exposed to a variety of toxins. So it becomes a point of who's going to be exposed. Who's going to be exposed? Who's going to react to this? Everybody's exposed. So it's a matter of reaction. I think we've come to a point as a growing population right now of people throughout the world that we can no longer afford to place mercury directly into people's mouth. When you think about it, the American Dental Association, in their latest, if you pick up their latest journal, what you'll see is that they are bragging now about being green. And in being green, they're asking their followers now to use the mercury separators because it's somewhat law that they have to be able to handle that mercury once it comes out of somebody's mouth in a very careful way. And if you don't do that, we're getting in trouble. Environmentally, we're getting in trouble. The effect of mercury in 1850 is different globally than it is today. We know that the scientists, environmental scientists doing the bear study are showing us right now that, what, 95% of that mercury those bears are getting is coming from human activity. It's our activity. We are in this thing together. This is not just the FDA decisions. This is everybody's decision right now. We're in real big trouble. Here's the thing that I'm also an investigative medical reporter. One of the things we have a problem and a risk on.
Queen, I'm sorry, we have to move to our next speaker.
Thank you.
John Cusack, Combat Lymphatech. Darlene D'Angelo.
Thank you. Darlene D'Angelo was unable to make it today. She was too ill to be able to be here with us, so I was asked to read her statement. Hello. I'm reading this testimony written by Darlene D'Angelo from North Palm Beach, Florida, who is injured mercury poison consumer. I would like to be here in person, but due to my disabling health symptoms from mercury poisoning, I'm not able to endure 2 days of traveling and activities. Since the onset of mercury poisoning, I battle every day with severe chronic fatigue, malaise, chronic and sporadic pain. Excuse me. On bad days, I wake up with chronic and sporadic pain and feel completely drained. I cannot function and I need to stay in bed most of the day. On better days, I wake up with chronic and sporadic pain and moderate fatigue, and I try to endure a few hours of functioning, but my energy levels decreases rapidly and I need naps and relaxation time every day for a few hours. I've been stricken with acute mercury poisoning. I had a silver filling drilled out and replaced with a white filling in August 2010, 9 months ago, when I was 46 years old. Within a few weeks, I developed over 25 chronic and sporadic neurological and health symptoms, including extreme fatigue, malaise, extreme memory and concentration impairment, severe depression and anxiety, chronic and sporadic symptoms of leg and muscle pain, twitching, back and shoulder muscle pain, tingling in my hands and feet, numb hands, feet pain, ears ringing, ear pain, episodes of hearing loss, eye pain, blurry eyesight, chest pain, heart palpitations, fainting episodes, shortness of breath, hypoglycemia, abdominal pain, headaches, irritable bowel episodes, teeth and jaw pain, cold hands and feet, difficulty urinating, sweating episodes, insomnia, and sleep disturbances, etc. I went to many doctors and had multiple tests done. I have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, which is one of the main causes from mercury poisoning. The unfortunate situation is that most doctors are ignorant to the symptoms related to mercury poisoning, and most dentists don't inform their patients of the potential, excuse me, the potential dangers of mercury fillings being filled or removing mercury fillings in their teeth, despite thousands of scientific studies proving that they are a hazard to human life and the environment. I had to do my own research to find out what happened to me. I learned that mercury poisoning is difficult to test and diagnose, and that most doctors don't consider the possibility that chronic or acute exposure to mercury from amalgam fillings can be at the root of over 100 symptoms. Mercury is known to kill cells and can cause serious diseases of neurological system, mental disorders, immune diseases, and cancer. At this time, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway have banned mercury fillings, and many other countries require health warnings. A schedule to phase out mercury require